Hey Archie, I'm pretty sure that I've considered every possible risk to my financial plan in retirement.
Well, Rob, let's check in because there's some hidden ones you should know about. I'm Archie Hoxton.
And I'm Rob Hoxton.
And this is Last Paycheck, weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. Welcome back to the Last Paycheck Podcast, brought to you by Hoxton Planning and Management. We're your hosts, CFP professionals Archie Hoxton and Rob Hoxton. And today we have an interesting topic for you, and it's all about risks that you face in retirement. But in this case, ones that you might not consider or, that kind of sneak up on you that are really important and could potentially derail your retirement plan if you're not thinking about them.
Yeah, think of them kind of like landmines that, that's a present danger if you're in a battlefield, I guess. And it's true that many of these things that we'll talk about today, you've probably considered or thought of, but they may not be front of mind in terms of, risks that could really derail your retirement.
Yeah, definitely. And there's probably much more than what we're covering in this list because, with risks, I mean, if you're living your life, you're experiencing risks. That is just part of being human. But these are kind of the big ones that come to mind as sort of the hidden ones.
So is one of them that a meteor falls on you?
That wasn't in the plan for today's podcast.
Okay.
But
so the likelihood of that one being an issue is pretty low, I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Polar bear attacks, that's another, but it's probably pretty low.
Yeah, in Florida. Yeah, probably not. Yeah. So
I would say the first thing that comes to mind for me when someone says, what are the risks that people don't generally consider when they go into retirement? It's probably inflation.
Yeah.
Now, lately, everybody's been thinking about inflation because it's been in the headlines. We've been experiencing higher than average inflation in the last couple of years.
Yeah. It influenced the whole political climate. And yeah, absolutely.
So some people might say, well, that's not so hidden, but most of the time it is. It's very hidden. If you were someone in 2019 and you considered what the big retirement risks were, inflation might not have been on your mind.
Oh, yeah, because it was basically non-existent. I think of inflation, Archie, kind of like if you have an old truck, and don't we love old trucks?
Yeah.
That has, you're not really aware of it, but serious rust right under the paint or maybe in the chassis, and you're just cruising along and you don't realize it's eroding the stability of that vehicle.
Right.
And boom, something breaks. Inflation is like this invisible, sort of deadly, rusting, situation that's happening to your financial life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, a lot can happen over a 30-year retirement. If you look at prices over how they change over 30 years, it's kind of amazing. And if you go year to year, it's hard to tell unless you have a spike in inflation. It's hard to tell.
Like we had a couple years ago, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell and notice that, things are getting more expensive because it's pretty slow. I mean, typically it's between like 2 and 4%. That's kind of where you typically see it, but that builds over a while. And all of a sudden, if you're retired, you might end up realizing, I have to draw more money out of my savings every year, or every couple of years I have to bump my withdrawal. So that's where the risk lies, is that you have to take more and more and more money out of your savings and investments in order to pay for the same number of the same amount of goods in a given year.
Yeah.
So that's where the risk comes in.
It's really interesting. I remember when I was studying to be a financial planner and doing these case studies and building financial plans for hypothetical families. You could build a financial plan and that family would have plenty of cash flow to fund what was important to them in the future once they retired. And then you would remember, or your professor would remind you, by the way, you didn't put an inflation assumption in here. And the whole plan would blow up. And even now, when we had that spike in inflation, we did adjust our assumed inflation, going forward a little bit. And just a 1% adjustment in that factored over a 30-year retirement lifespan, that can blow a financial plan up. And it's really profound. So something, if you're doing your financial planning, if you're working with a financial planner, one of the first things you should ask when you're looking at the plan is, hey, what's the inflation assumption here? What sort of cost of living adjustment should I expect when I start drawing on my resources in retirement once I've gotten that last paycheck?
Yeah. So that's one of the big risks. Mitigating that risk, sometimes we get questions like, I don't want to take any investment risk. It's like, okay, well, how are you going to deal with inflation risk, right? Your purchasing power eroding away. There's no way to get around having risk in your life in general, but also in your finances. So, it's like, do you risk having your purchasing power eroded away over time? Or do you take some investment risk and have some growth enough to outpace inflation and accept the fact that that's going to come with some fluctuation in your account values and some volatility? So that's what we typically recommend is, you need to have some growth in your accounts in order to outpace inflation and make sure that you can continue to afford your lifestyle for decades into the future. So that's the main way to mitigate is having a sound portfolio construction and not focusing on assets that inflation's a weakness, like cash or bonds.
Archie, another thing that is becoming more and more a problem for retirees is the cost of healthcare. And there's some interesting studies that talk about what healthcare is going to cost in your retirement years. And you can touch on those amounts. I don't remember what they are, but it is, we go into retirement. Most of us will have Medicare, and the Part A, the hospitalization part of Medicare is you don't pay for out of pocket anymore. You've been paying into the system during your work years for that. Part B, which is all the other stuff, going to the doctor and that kind of stuff, doctor's visits, that is a premium that you pay. It's withheld from your Social Security check usually, and there's a sliding scale. It can be somewhere in the mid 100s per month per person to almost $600 a month. Then there's Part C. There's your supplement that you typically buy, which is cost premium, and then Part D, the drug benefit. And so, but that's not all of it, because there are a lot of things that you might want to have in terms of healthcare in retirement that may not be fully covered by your health insurance, setup. So what was the average number that people are going to spend in retirement?
It's upwards of $300,000 on average. So that's a pretty substantial number.
Much of that's covered by insurance, or it should be, I suppose.
Yeah, but there can be a lot of out-of-pocket. It depends on the coverage that you get. So a lot of that depends on how you choose. If you choose original Medicare, which would be, A and B, and then you go with a supplement and Part D, you can customize that quite a bit, or you might go Part C and get Medicare Advantage. And a lot of that depends on choosing the plan that's right for you. But it's expensive because that's where we have the most health problems in life. If we get to an old age, generally speaking, we're more likely to be spending more on healthcare for all kinds of different doctors.
We have 3 episodes. It's a month or 2 ago where we talked about retiree health insurance and Medicare supplements and all of that. Some great advice. Some of our listeners have actually talked to the guest, and he's been a great help to them. So I would encourage people to go back and look at those episodes.
Absolutely. And there's ways that you can mitigate this risk, right? We talk about choosing the right plan, managing your income. And when I say income, I mean taxable, ordinary income, the income that affects your Medicare premiums. If you can manage that and make sure you're not realizing more income than you need to in any given year, you can control that premium a little bit better. And you use that through having multiple tax buckets in retirement accounts, a taxable account, a Roth IRA, traditional IRA, and most importantly, an HSA. That's probably the best way to manage your healthcare costs.
Health savings account.
Health savings account in retirement. It's an amazing powerhouse of an account. You need a little bit of longer runway to plan for that one, but it's a great tool.
Yeah. What about the other kind of healthcare that people don't necessarily think about, namely long-term care? And what's the chance that a typical retiree is going to need some level of care, long-term care?
So, yeah, 70% of people over the age of 65 will at some point in the rest of their life need long-term care. And when we say long-term care, we're not talking about like going to the hospital or something. This more has to do with memory care, skilled nursing. If you've lost a handful of the daily activities of living, which is, getting dressed, eating, getting out of bed, using the bathroom,
bathing,
getting dressed, bathing. There's, different definitions, but if you've lost a handful of those and you need help, that's kind of where it becomes long-term care.
And it's not, for the most part, covered by Medicare or
Right.
Medicare supplement coverage. This is a different type of, if you buy insurance, a different type of insurance, and it's really quite expensive, but something to consider, and maybe even partially insuring and partially self-funding, but something that you need to talk to your financial planner about, I would say.
Yeah, because the cost of long-term care can be outrageously expensive. It can be $100,000 a year. It could be $90,000 a year. It depends on the level of care and the facility, or it can be, covered by Medicaid, but you'll have to basically, in most cases, get through all of your personal assets first. So,
what about mistakes that people might make from an investment standpoint that can have a long-lasting effect on their financial well-being in retirement?
Yeah, this is a risk that's kind of like, we tend to be, as human beings, we've all experienced being our own worst enemy. And investing is a really common one. We're not hardwired to be good at investing. We're more wired to, usually I'll see there's usually two types of people who like to spend money and people who like to save money. And, we're usually kind of hardwired in one of those directions. I find that especially people who tend to save money, can have a harder time with the ups and downs in the market. Same for people who like to spend money. But at the end of the day, investing is not just a numbers and technical, practice. It is very human. It is very emotional, and we're driven by those emotions that it causes.
It's not really about managing your investments as much as it is about managing your behavior.
Right.
Right. And your emotions. When you talk about hardwired, I think about those early humans that were walking along on the Serengeti, and here comes a cheetah or something. And what are they going to do? I mean, there's a risk, a present danger. What are they going to do? If they're going to survive, they're going to run.
Mm-hmm.
So we're hardwired to do that. That is the opposite. That's the opposite kind of wiring that we need when we're investing.
Right.
So when we perceive a threat and maybe the investments in our portfolio are going down because of a market event, if we act like that early human did and run from the cheetah, meaning we sell and take off, that's quite possibly the worst possible thing that we could have done. So we have just completely messed up, our ability to realize our financial objectives long term. So
yeah. I mean, there's so much. It's so interesting how old that tendency is, because when we say sell your investments and just go to cash, and you're in, many people they're like, I just need to cut the losses and stop the bleeding. But often that's the worst thing because, in history, often the best days in the market are followed immediately. They immediately follow some of the worst. So if you're selling on the worst day, you're risking missing the best and potentially not recovering anywhere near as quickly. I mean, you could delay your recovery by years by making rash decisions.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see what comments we get, because whenever we talk about this, a lot of folks will say, well, that's just ridiculous. But it's not. I mean, time is and experience has borne this out. I remember 2008 in the credit crisis, early 2009 in March. I remember it so well. I had 5 clients that finally convinced me to take them out of the market. It was March 9th. The market bottomed. Within 2 years, the market was printing new highs. And it seemed like it was the end of the world financially at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So history has proven that trying to time the market doesn't work.
Right.
It's a game of luck. So really the saying that time, not timing, is the key to investment success is still true.
Absolutely. I think we should touch on one other side of this coin before we wrap up. And that is, so we kind of talked about fear and fear-based decision-making and investing and how that can derail a retirement plan. Also, greed is sort of the flip side of that. It's the early human that, stumbles upon a fruit tree and eats every piece of ripe fruit right then and there because the same thing that's like, you sit down and eat a whole pizza, it's the sort of that old wiring of like, I have it, I need to consume it.
And they have a massive tummy ache afterward.
Yeah. That there's a tendency to, when you see something happening in the market that is, maybe it's kind of like you see a get rich quick opportunity or something that is really risky, but could potentially pay off in a big way in a really, really short term. And so you do that and then it burns you in the long term. So, whether it's, hey, my friend just made a bunch of money on Bitcoin, I'm going to go put my retirement in Bitcoin. Or, maybe it's, some stock that's you're hearing about and people are making money. And there's another one, sort of the FOMO of hearing other people having success doing, which is essentially they're getting lucky in gambling. You have to watch out for that side too, because that can create some pretty devastating mistakes as well.
Yeah.
So I think with investing, it's about discipline and having a plan and, keeping it simple. Successful long-term investing is,
it's not
kind
about
of boring in the short term. It's great in the long run.
And it's not a get rich quick sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's not. I mean, that's speculation, which is a different topic for a different show.
Yeah. I think that's about all we have time for today. There's plenty of other hidden retirement risks that you should know about and start planning for, but maybe we'll do another episode in the future. But anyway, if you like the episode, please remember to like, subscribe, leave us a comment, hit the bell for notifications. Reach out if you have questions or you want to talk to us directly. We'd love to hear from you all. And we look forward to seeing you next time. You've been watching Last Paycheck, weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. If you like this show, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Last Paycheck is available anywhere you get your podcasts.